Pedro's nightmare, the border of no return.
The journey into the unknown. Pedro was only 15 years old when he made the decision. Life in his small Mexican village had become impossible. The cartels had taken everything. His father was gone, and his mother was too sick to travel. So he packed a small bag, kissed his mother goodbye, and joined a group of migrants heading toward the United States. People said the desert was dangerous, cartels, border patrol, the deadly heat. But what no one told him was that some who cross the border never make it to the other side. Not because of the desert, not because of the heat, but because of something much worse. The forbidden path. Pedro's group was led by a coyote, a man paid to smuggle people across the border. His name was Salazar, and he had made this trip hundreds of times. But as they approached the Sonoran desert, Salazar suddenly stopped. His face went pale. "We can't go this way," he muttered. "Not through here." One of the men in the group scoffed. "Why not?" Salazar hesitated. Then he whispered, "This is Devil's Crossing." Pedro's stomach twisted. He had heard of it before. A place where people disappear, where even the border patrol won't go, where the desert itself is alive. But they had no choice. If they turned back, the cartels would kill them. So they kept walking. And as soon as they crossed into the desert, the wind stopped. The air grew heavy, and the sun disappeared. Like the world itself was warning them, turn back. The first vanishing. For hours they walked in silence. The sand felt too soft, almost as if it were breathing beneath their feet. Then around midnight, they heard it, a sound in the distance, like footsteps coming from behind them. Salazar turned, shining his flashlight into the darkness. Nothing, just miles of sand. Then someone screamed. Pedro spun around. One of the men in the group, Diego, was gone. His footprints just ended in the sand, like he had been swallowed whole. The others panicked. Some wanted to run back, some wanted to pray, but Salazar shook his head. "We keep moving. We don't stop. We don't talk. We don't look back." Pedro's blood ran cold because he already knew the truth. They were not alone. The shadows in the sand. They walked in fear. No one spoke. No one dared to look back. But Pedro felt it. Something watching them, moving just beyond the edge of the light. Then the sand shifted. Something rose from the ground. Tall, thin, wrong. Its skin blended with the night. Its eyes were empty. And when it opened its mouth, no sound came out, just wind. Pedro's heart pounded. Another scream, then another. Two more people vanished into the darkness. The footsteps in the sand were the only thing left behind. Salazar grabbed Pedro. "Run!" The dead walked the border. Pedro ran until his lungs burned. The desert was alive. The sand whispered beneath his feet. He could hear voices, his mother's, his father's, calling his name. "Pedro, don't leave us." His vision blurred. His legs felt heavy. Then he tripped, fell face first into the sand. And when he looked up, he saw them, the missing migrants, standing in the sand, eyes hollow, faces twisted, mouths whispering, "Join us!" Pedro screamed. The border that disappeared. Pedro forced himself up. He could see it now, the border fence. He was so close. He sprinted toward it, tears blinding his vision. Behind him, the whispers turned into screams. The dead were chasing him, hands reaching, voices hissing. No one leaves the desert. Pedro lunged for the fence, and everything went black. The Border Patrol's discovery. Pedro woke up in a holding cell. Border Patrol had found him lying in the sand, alone. They asked him where his group was. Pedro tried to tell them about Diego, about Salazar, about the things in the sand, but they just shook their heads. There was no group, they said. You were the only one out there. Pedro's blood went cold. Number that wasn't possible. They were real. He saw them. He heard them. But when they checked the desert, there were no footprints, no bodies, no trace that anyone else had ever been there. Just Pedro and the whispers in the wind, waiting for the next traveler to cross the border.
Final message for the viewer. Some who cross the border make it. Some are caught, but some just vanish. The desert is old. The desert is hungry. And if you ever cross it, be careful. Because if you hear voices in the wind, you're already too late.